Hi, welcome to Camelback Ventures Entrepreneurship is Health and Wellness panel. My name's Selam. I'm the Conscious Tech Senior Lead at Camelback Ventures. Um, and so this is part of our Entrepreneurship Is campaign. It's a series of motivational stories of what propels Camelback Fellows and other phenomenal founders to build ventures the world desperately needs. Today, I am very excited to be joined by some incredible Camelback founders from our Conscious Tech portfolio. Ashley Edwards, Alyson Stoner, and Priya Iyer. So here they are. Before we jump in, I want to thank you all for participating, but also I want to say that I'm excited that we're finally having this conversation. I think it's long overdue about the around health and wellness, especially around the unique perspective of BIPOC women and like non-binary founders. Before we jump in, can we do some quick intros? Ashley, could you start first by sharing your name, your pronouns, where you're at, and a little bit about your venture?
Sure. My name is Ashley Edwards. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm the founder and CEO of MindRight Health. MindRight is a mental health startup focused on increasing accessibility of mental health services for Medicaid populations. And we provide mental health coaching over text message to youth to really meet young people where they are and make it as accessible as possible. Glad to be here.
Thanks, Ashley. Alyson, would you like to go next?
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. My name is Alyson Stoner. I use they, them pronouns, and I'm based in California, but my venture is with my co founder and sibling in Ohio. And we are founders of Movement Genius. We are a subscription platform that provides mental and emotional health tools, stress relief techniques, and guided somatic movement programs, all designed by therapists to help support and improve well-being. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Alyson. Priya, over to you.
Hi, everyone. I'm really excited to be here with Ashley and Alyson and hear more from them as well. I'm Priya Iyer. I go by she, her pronouns, and I'm the founder of Our Roots. And what we do is we connect BIPOC communities who are pregnant and postpartum and impacted by poverty to peer coaches who share lived experiences in order to prevent post or perinatal anxiety and depression. And I'm based in Oakland, California.
Thanks, Yale. Thanks for the introductions. So it's obvious that you all do quite a bit of work in the health and wellness space. What we're going to focus, part of today's conversation is on not just your experience navigating entrepreneurship, especially as you build health and wellness, but like how you navigate your own health and wellness as you built your ventures. So with that, I'm going to provide a little bit of context to get this conversation going. As you know, Camelback supports BIPOC women, non-binary founders who are building social ventures, right? So like the folks we support don't come from moneyed networks, have often experienced financial trauma. Many of whom are parents and or have familial responsibilities, and also regularly experience racism, sexism, ableism. And these are on their own, I think, super heavy burdens. And I feel like these are compounded by the fact that you are building ventures which the world desperately needs, which is hard, which comes with like super high highs that we talked about, but also really low lows. And so my first question to all of you is like, how have you navigated the low lows of entrepreneurship as you've built your ventures? We'll go and we'll switch it up. Priya, would you like to start first?
Sure. Happy to start. So I can start by just sharing an example. It took us a year to find our first pilot partner, which I can share more about in a bit. But we had finally gotten an initial individual investment to get that work going. And we were about to run out of everything, all of our funding. We weren't going to be able to pay our peer coaches. And I had been paying myself by doing an entrepreneurship in residence program where I worked part of my time for that company and then part in order to build my own work. And that was about to end as well. So just in time, we got into Camelback, and I actually emailed Selam. I don't know if I'm allowed to say this, Selam. Hopefully I am. And I was really straight with her, and I was like, hey, we're about to run out of everything. And Camelback was able to be flexible with us and give us part of that money up front so that we could keep going. And we would not be in existence had they not done that. So I share that just to say, like, a couple of ways that we've navigated these low lows in entrepreneurship are to one, for me, it's to speak up and not be silenced into conforming to the current system that says, you know, we as entrepreneurs starting these really difficult and impactful companies should not be paid. Not all funders are going to respond the way that Camelback did. But with that said, if we don't speak up, then the system will perpetuate itself. So that's one huge thing. And then another big thing for me in navigating these low lows is really listening to our community. So I'm in the community in Oakland that I work in, and I spend a lot of time talking to the birthing parents that we're working with, because that reminds me of the impact that we're having for them, for their children, hopefully even for their grandchildren. And then it moves me away from my frustration a lot of times, and decenters the work so that it's not about me and my frustration during those times. It's really about the impact that we want to have. And then the final piece of that for me is that I am a mama of two, and I want to build a world in which my babies can live in, and I'm proud of that. And so those are a couple of things I use to help me navigate the tough times.
Thanks, Priya. Alyson, would you like to share some of your story? How you've navigated the low lows?
Sure. Yes. Thank you. And thank you, Priya, for sharing that. I think what comes to mind for me in terms of well being is taking a step back and examining what paradigm I'm even using to think about well being. I think societally, we often compartmentalize well being / self care as a set of external activities. We also now couple it with capitalism and assume there's a product or an activity and experience that you have to pay for in order to accomplish well being. And in reality, while those activities really can be beneficial for temporary relief, they often don't address our day to day baseline of just what we need to self regulate and manage stress. And so, what was helpful for my co founder and I, and it's threaded into our product and service, is strengthening our mind body connection in a way where, without having to buy anything or carve out an entire hour, we more deeply understand our mental, emotional, physical, financial, spiritual capacity. And we have built in micro resets throughout the day where if I notice that I'm at 30%, I not only need to adjust my expectations of myself and maybe some timelines for a project, but also find the smallest immediate thing I can do to recharge. And one concept I will share that's been helpful for us, there's the idea of trigger stacking, where over the course of the day, we're pushed to our wits' end in small ways that add up until we explode or until we burn out. And I've started taking note of the different triggers or moments of activation throughout the day and trying to, in those moments, de-stress or take just even a minute to take some deep breaths and regulate so that I don't find myself reaching my peak when I get home and then my partner is like, why am I getting the worst of you? So micro resets has been important and sometimes feels like the only thing we can afford when you're so busy with so many other time-consuming tasks.
Y'all are sharing so many nuggets of wisdom. I'm so curious, Ashley. How do you navigate the low lows of entrepreneurship?
Yeah, well, I completely agree with Priya keeping the impact at the center and stories of impact really being there to support you when you're going through tough times. I also really resonate with what Alyson shared about having self care really deeply threaded in the system of your company and how you operate day to day. At our company, for example, every Monday, our team shares self care goals for the week, what you're going to do. You're going to drink more water, spend more time with your family, sleep more, etc. And everyone on the team encourages each other and holds each other accountable to reaching those self care goals every week. And that's just a part of our all hands meeting because it's as important as doing the work. Because especially working in wellness and for us working in mental health, it's incredibly emotionally intense work. And so it is not only something we should do, but it's really our obligation to take care of ourselves so that we can better take care of other people. And I think the other thing I would add is in those little moments, what has helped me is always remembering the things that are in my control and keeping my focus on that as opposed to the many, many overwhelming things that are outside of our control as founders. So what I can control is who I'm spending my time with. Are those people and relationships draining or energizing? I can protect my surroundings, my home, taking walks every day, like really protecting my peace. And when I'm able to focus on those things I can control, I feel much more empowered and I'm much more energized to continue the work in otherwise, really challenging circumstances.
I appreciate how in each of your responses you alluded to the work you do for yourselves, but also like how that translates into how you're building your ventures, which I think is I'm very grateful for it because I feel like we need more of y'all out there building these kind of ventures. But it is certainly not the norm in the tech space. Like even in the health tech space, where like you would imagine the folks building these ventures should know better. Um, and the fact that these tech spaces also aren't filled with a lot of people who look like us with our lived experiences, um, the products out there just aren't made for us. And so, but there's definitely a need. Like the fact that you have your ventures, like demonstrate that there's a need, and that there's a demand for Priya. I'm going to use your term, culturally reverent health tech products. And so I'm curious, Ashley and Priya, like how do you make sure the voices of uh, the communities you serve have like drive your offering? Ashley, I know you just went last, but do you want to start first?
I'm happy to start. So at MindRight, our service was founded to serve BIPOC youth and youth from low-income backgrounds, and so that is who we stand for. That is who we really target with our solution. And so before even founding MindRight, we engaged in hundreds of user interviews with youth and communities to really develop something that made sense for them and in partnership with them. I think a lot of times we see in healthcare, we have very standard, typical interventions that are evidence-based and viewed as best practices. But we have to look at what's actually working for people and allow people to choose what is healing for them. We cannot define what is healing for someone. And so with MindRight, that's why we ended up with this very non-traditional, non-clinical text message, mental health coaching service, because that's what our youth wanted. And I think the more that founders, systems, providers can really attune the services that they're creating with the actual needs and desires of communities, the better off that will be.
Yeah, that makes sense. Priya, did you want to share your thoughts?
Yeah, Ashley speaking my language, especially when she said we cannot define what's healing for somebody else. I love that. And that's very much been our experience with our roots in many ways. We found, and I found in my own experience being pregnant postpartum, I see this with so many of our communities, that there are so many other people aside from the BIPOC communities that we work with who are impacted by poverty that make decisions on their behalf without ever talking to them. And so, for example, we're met with a lot of skepticism when we say people want to use a low tech platform. We're met with a lot of skepticism even when we say that there is a deep need for this type of culturally reverent care, and it's more effective. And so what we have done is really grounded ourselves in the voices of our communities. And the way that we've done that, or just to give a couple of examples of how that has shifted our work, is a lot of, I think, mental health services that are not designed for our communities offer quick kind of transactional services that aren't very deep, and they feel, very transactional. But we're really trying to offer something transformative because people have told us specifically that they want to build a relationship with a person. And we use tech in the backdrop as a way to make some of those things more efficient, but we are reliant on our peer coaches. And that's really important to us, to honor the needs of the communities. Another example is, like, we started out with this very preset curriculum, right? But it was very academic. It didn't work for our communities. And it didn't really match a lot of the day-to-day needs that they had. So instead, we redesigned our service such that clients really drive what their sessions look like, and our coaches work with them to co-create that. So that they have, a joyful pregnancy and a joyful postpartum experience.
I started with that question because, though I feel like it's broader than the topic that we're focusing on, which is like health and wellness amongst entrepreneurs, like diverse entrepreneurs. The entrepreneurs we support come from those communities, right? So, like, and given that there's an increasing number of entrepreneurs, color, folks who are queer, folks who are disabled, I'm so curious to hear your thoughts on, like, based on your experience, like, what changes would you like to see in health tech ventures, like, deliver so that more founders who look like us have our experiences, have wellness support they need as they build their ventures? For this question, I'll start. Alyson, would you like to go first?
Sure. This one is, well, all the questions are loaded and have many layers and speak to individual, communal, systemic, organizational components. So for us, as we were building, especially because when we researched the wellness market and saw who was disproportionately, not receiving competent care, we knew our baseline had to be accessibility and inclusivity and diversity, and not just as buzzwords, but even infrastructurally. When we designed the bare bones of the company itself, our sort of approach was, if we can't take care of the employees, then we're not ready to build. We don't need to build yet another inaccessible wellness space. There are many of those already. And in fact, for us, we believe that that would only further drive health inequity, to build a great product for a narrow group of people. So infrastructurally, in terms of who we were looking to hire and bring on as collaborators, we wanted to ensure that they had assistance with using technology, since we have digital tools. Some of these instructors are incredible in-person facilitators and simply weren't experienced utilizing technology, or due to a certain kind of disability, weren't able to access certain technology. And so we sort of wanted to think ahead before we even brought real humans into the fold, because we think if you can't create as safe and competent of a space as possible, like, I don't know that it's worth doing. So infrastructurally, then our faculty, of course, the folks we brought in, when we think of diversity, we're not just thinking of identity markers and lived experiences and physical embodiments. We're also thinking expertise and modalities. So we wanted to take a cross-disciplinary approach to mental and emotional well-being. So it wasn't just, respectfully, another mental health solution that uses cognitive behavioral therapy. That is wonderful for some. Can even be harmful for other people. And so we really wanted to just have a range and a spectrum of representation in the content that we share. And then customers, we're thinking of real human beings. And so our research approach was very community based upfront. We thought like we can't build this for you without listening to you. And so originally we were focused on youth. So we had a queer youth council, and we designed a thing alongside with them. And we continue to do community based projects. So I share all of that to say it feels embedded into every step, to think about these things, but then speaking to how we can support founders, underrepresented founders, and specific needs. Dare I say that if we really wanted to provide the support that's needed, we're looking at a much larger shift in terms of how businesses are run, like the sense of urgency, the individualism. Like there are just structural components here that I think if we want to support entrepreneurs of color, queer entrepreneurs, people who have very different lived experiences and valuable expertise, then we also have to believe that different modes of operation are equally substantial. So that I think is a tougher thing to communicate to VCs of a certain sort, but we're grateful for groups like Camelback who get it and who are willing to say, okay, it might be slower growth, but it's meaningful growth nonetheless, or it might look a little different, but actually that's exactly the way we need to shift how businesses are run. That was long-winded. Please, Priya, take it away, or Ashley, whoever.
Priya, what are your thoughts? You can either add to what Alyson said, or you can you can take up as much space as you want. Alyson, I don't want you to think that there is like a set amount of time.
Yeah, I mean, Alyson has me thinking a lot about different modes of operation and the systems that allow or prevent us potentially from building ventures in a way that are most impactful. So when I think of kind of bringing more people of color, queer folks, disabled folks into the space, I don't think there's a catch-all. And so when I think about how the system can shift to bring that about, I really see a lot of that relying on funders. Honestly, it's funders really trusting and backing founders and bringing more folks into the space and saying, hey, like you need to take care of yourselves as you do this. So let's set aside X percentage of the funding that we're putting into you and make sure that you're spending on what's meaningful to you. So that could look very different for Alyson, for Ashley, and for myself. Like for me, it might be, I need a little bit of childcare, right? And that will help me kind of really focus right now. And so I think that having that trust in the founder and allowing them to shape their company in that way, and allowing them to also invest in the people that they're going to work with so that they can support their mental wellness without all of the strings attached would be huge.
I feel like we could have a whole 3-hour session on just your responses to this. I won't do that. We can have coffee at some point later in Portugal, maybe. But you both brought up the idea of or the topic of funders, and so the next question I have is going to relate to money, right? So like you all shared in your responses that Ashley, you said healing looks differently, right? There are different modalities like that work better for people. And depending on the type of community you have, like, and they'll tell you what that is, but you certainly cannot know ahead of time until you ask. You're all creating products that are designed for your communities, but that are also accessible. And I'm so curious, like how, because I feel like a lot of funders like, I'm looking for the next big thing. And a lot of that makes it so that these services become inaccessible because like funders are looking to recoup as much of their investment back as possible. Um, so how are you navigating this? Like how are you creating health tech products that are affordable for the communities you serve? Um, Ashley, I'll start with you, and then Alison, I'm going to take it to you next.
Yeah, I mean, I firmly believe having access to mental health support and wellness services is a basic human right. If we all want to be well, and I believe it all should be free to the end user and to communities. So it was really important for us to mind right. Like that was the biggest challenge we had to solve. How in this very complex and largely inefficient healthcare system can we make, our service accessible to people? And so for us, given the communities that we are working with, we really look to how can we partner with Medicaid and health insurance to make this accessible. And so after a ton of research, a ton of just work in partnership with community leaders, healthcare leaders, we were finally able to do it. So Mindray is now fully reimbursable if you are on Medicaid in several states. And through that, it's free for hundreds of thousands of people right now. And we're just trying to get the word out. But I think that should not be the only solution for this to be accessible to communities. And I think there's a lot of policy work that needs to be done. There's a lot of reshaping of how we think about philanthropy and venture capital that needs to be done so that we can support founders with making this, all of our very needed solutions, a reality for the people who we're doing this for.
Alison, would you like to share some?
Yes, and congratulations on the growth. That's so wonderful. It's so needed. Yeah, so what I'm hearing and something I deeply am learning to appreciate about the entrepreneurial journey is that we'll each come to the table with different skill sets, different networks, and we'll have to kind of call upon creativity to find the pathway that works. So, my background is in entertainment, and I learned a lot about sponsoring events. And so, we wanted to make sure we had a free version of all of our tools available. And so, we chose to do that by bringing in sponsors to cover the expenses of the instructors and putting on workshops and other programming. And then we also offer a sliding scale for our direct to consumer side. So you pay what you can. If that's $1, great. And we also always leave, an email, shoot us a note and let us know if you just really need class and it's not within your means this week or this month or ever, because we don't really have interest in turning people away. It's just not, that's not well, that's not why we started the company. And then we do have our subscription model, and there are folks who actually choose to sponsor other community members. So some people say, "Hey, I actually can spot 10 people this week," and also our classes are very, very affordable to begin with. We're providing 250 videos and weekly classes with therapists for like $5 a month. That's pretty low, but it still might not be low enough for some people. So they do have options to participate in the community. And then on our B2B side, that's sort of where we're trying to be more strategic in bringing in revenue with organizations that do have larger budgets and can, hand over several $1,000s for a deal. So we're not trying to actively acquire tens of thousands of customers to reach that same number. So we're trying a hybrid D2C and B2B approach at the moment. Doesn't mean that it's going to be sustainable or that it'll work long term, but we're just going to keep getting creative. And in the meantime, it's always so worth it when you hear the people who are able to access the class they needed when they needed it.
Ashley, you said something that really resonated, and that mental health is a human right. I want to make sure I got that right. And it resonates a lot because I feel like I come from a community that thinks of it as something extra. Like they don't conceive physical health as on the same par as mental health, and I'm like, and it took me a long time to get to that place. right? Um, I also believe like no, everyone deserves to feel healing. Everyone deserves to feel safe. Everyone deserves to feel healthy. Um, the way you all talk about what you're offering, but also how you're building your ventures is, I'm sure you know this, right? Different than how a lot of like health tech founders talk about their ventures. Um, I'm hopeful, especially as like there are more folks like you out there who are building the ventures the world desperately needs, that narrative will eventually change. Um, uh, I'll stop like that's it. Um, but I'm curious, like based on your like visioning or your hopes in the future, like in what ways do you see tech changing how underserved founders and underserved communities access health and wellness services?
I can jump in first real quick. So I think this is a fantastic question because I think that tech can either exacerbate health inequities or it can start to bridge the gap. And it absolutely matters who's behind the tech. Who is the CTO at companies driving these movements? Who is building the AI data sets and models? I think that's really going to determine if we're going to see some advances in health equity or not. I am optimistic, but I think we also have to keep holding leaders accountable to make sure that's top of mind because there is so much great potential, but there's also a lot of harm that can be done as well.
Agreed. I feel like I use every opportunity to say that like tech can be the change we want to see, or it can be the change we don't want to see. Um, Priya, would you like to share your thoughts?
I couldn't agree with that more. And I would say I would also, if what we talked about before, and we really do see more proximate leaders being invested in holistically happens into the future, then I think that we can actually break down a lot of the kind of physical and mental health silos that we see in the current healthcare system, that are really based, I think, on a Western model of what medicine should look like. Like, for example, we know in the perinatal space that if we are able to support people in preventing anxiety, depression, that can prevent low birth weight babies, for example, or all of these other physical things that we are seeing. So they're so intertwined. And I feel like low tech platforms have an opportunity to offer more accessibility to people so that they can get that type of holistic care that they need. And then the other big thing I see is that I think if our technologies are built by proximate leaders and they're built thoughtfully, then this idea that like technology is not for us, that I see in so many of our communities, will slowly start to dissolve because that's absolutely not true. It, as Ashley said, it is about the people behind that are building the technologies, not the tech itself. Um, and we've seen that happen where in some of our communities, for example, there are immigrants who maybe haven't accessed our video platform before, and so we just support them in signing on. And once they're on, they realize, oh, this is fantastic because this is just in the background. It's a way for me to not have to go into the clinic and miss work. And then I don't have to worry about who's going to take care of my other older kids when I access the service. I can do it all at home, and it's easy for me to sign on. And now I have this optionality, and I'm able to connect with somebody that really understands where I'm coming from, not just with language, but in all of these other cultural aspects. And so I'm hopeful that we will move in that direction into the future.
Alyson, what are you hopeful for?
Well, now, Selam, what I'm hopeful for is very different than the initial question.
My apologies, please. What is your
I,
response to the initial question?
yeah, I mean, I think listening to everyone share, it is worth reiterating that technology, of course, can expand reach and information access. I know so many folks who didn't have language for their experience, who now, because of technology, can make sense of their day-to-day ailments or things that they're, struggling with on a daily basis. And also just for, I think of a couple mental health platforms who are specifically going into rural communities to support queer youth, and they're using a digital tool, and so that is powerful to provide community in an area that might otherwise be isolating or difficult to connect with your authentic self, not just in rural spaces, really in all spaces. So yes, the reach, awesome. One thing I think about often is technology actually assisting well-being, or is it worsening just by sheer use of, it could be the blue light, it could be the addictive property of it, it could also just be that you're no longer nervous system to nervous system in real life, you have a screen between you and the person. So I think about the specific technologies and how we develop them, and I don't always think higher tech is better, per se. In fact, I sometimes wish technology could be more of the just bridge to eventually get you to a support that's more interpersonal, in person. But the final thing that I'll say in this regard is something I am hopeful about in terms of technology is that there are more of these templatized, off the shelf services that allow non technical founders like myself to still build a product that is tech enabled. And that I think is really exciting because so many humans have incredible ideas and the ability to execute on them, even, but simply don't know how to code, or they don't have the some of the organizational support that you can now find in these templatized services. So we built our entire company on a website platform called Kajabi, and I couldn't. It would have taken years for us to do it ourselves, or to find the software developers who we could trust. And so, no, it's not the highest tech, but it's allowed us to reach thousands of people while we iterate on, improving the tech experience. So that excites me.
Thanks, Alison. And I love how you brought it back. Appreciate that. All right, so I'm going to ask you one final question before we wrap up. So you are clearly all innovators and leaders in the health tech space. You're building ventures from the ground up. In a few words, can you share what inclusive and/or impactful entrepreneurship means to you, as it relates to the work you're doing in the health and wellness space? And I will start with Priya.
This is a good question. I would say one of my deepest beliefs around this is that we should be designing for the margins.
Love it. Short and sweet, very clear. Alison, did you want to share your thoughts? Do you want me to go to Ashley? Yeah. Okay. Ashley, would you like to share your thoughts?
Yeah, I can go for it. For me, inclusive entrepreneurship is a space where BIPOC, non-binary, queer, underrepresented founders have an opportunity, an equitable opportunity to do well and be well at the same time. And we don't have to do work where it feels like we have to give up a piece of who we are. I would like for me, that represents inclusive entrepreneurship.
I suppose I'll try to follow that. Um, when I think of inclusive entrepreneurship, what came to mind initially was it's a fundamental shift from the current paradigm, and it will end up benefiting all, far more, if not all, people. Um, but at its essence, it's a departure from what currently is uh, driving industry. And so it's a reimagination of business, of livelihood, of well-being, of community, of yeah, shared experiences. So I'm just thinking in this moment that coming from a highly exclusive paradigm, it really invites us to fundamentally shift from the ground up how we conceive of any and all industry experiences.
What I appreciate from your responses, these ones and the ones from before, is that not only are you imagining uh, a, a different way of being, like as individuals, but also serving the folks you serve, but also like building the ventures you are building. I think that as someone who spends a lot of time visioning like what the world could be, and then like working with folks who I uh, believe can bring that world into fruition, it makes me really even more hopeful um, to like be in community with y'all, because that just reiterates like that the fact like work is happening, the world is coming, and then all we got to do is keep supporting the right people. Um, that's all for today. I want to thank each of you, Ashley, Alyson, Priya. Thank you so much for sharing your insights, your expertise with us. If you want to learn more about these incredible founders, the work they're doing, show your support. Be sure to check out their websites and follow them on social media. You can also learn more about us at Camelback Ventures and the Entrepreneurship Is movement by visiting camelbackventures.org. Lastly, thank you all for tuning in and listening. If you joined us late, a replay of this conversation is available soon on Camelback's YouTube channel. Until next time.